This week we're going to move to the west wall. The west wall is the wall of the afternoon, the wall that faces the direction the sun moves towards as the day progresses, the wall of the wilderness tribes, the ones who lived on the edges, who fought on the frontiers, who dwelt in the hard places between the abundance of the center and the darkness of the outside. 3 windows, 3 tribes born of servant women, Dan from Bela, Rachel's servant, and Gad and Asher from Zilpah, Leah's servant. 3 tribes who never occupied the center of Israel's identity, but whose stories are among the most instructive in the entire Old Testament. Dan, the judge, whose light went out. Gad, the warrior, who pressed on every side but is pressing back. And Asher, the abundant, whose oil never ran dry. Each window is a different color. Each window is a different story, and all 3 together are telling us something about what it means to carry the light in the wilderness and what happens when you put it down. On the first window, the one on the right, my right, your left, is Dan, the candelabrum in the dark. Chagall painted Dan in dark blue, not the hopeful blue of a sky or the luminous deep blue of water, but dark blue, the blue of night. The blue of the deep places where light struggles to penetrate. And at the center of the window, the dominant image, the thing Chagall placed at the heart of Dan's panel, is a 3-branched candelabrum, a menorah shape, the instrument of light in the darkness, the thing designed to burn. And Chagall chose it carefully because it serves both as a tree of life and a tree of justice simultaneously. Light and judgment together. The candelabrum that illuminates and the candelabrum that reveals, because light always does both. It comforts and it exposes. It guides and it shows what's been hidden. Jacob's blessing over Dan is one of the most compressed and complex in the entire chapter of Genesis 49. In verses 16 through 18, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path, that bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backward. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Dan shall judge his people. The name Dan means to judge. Din in Hebrew, the one who brings justice, the one who decides, the one who discerns. And Jacob gives Dan the highest possible calling, the vocation of justice, of seeing clearly and deciding rightly. And then immediately the blessing shifts into something darker. A serpent in the way. A viper by the path. Biting the horse's heels. The serpent imagery is not incidental. The serpent in Genesis is the creature associated with the deception and the subversion of what should be straight. Jacob is giving Dan the calling of justice and simultaneously warning that the tribe's method of achieving it will be crooked. The judge who bites from the hidden place. The justice that comes from the ambush rather than from the open seat of authority. And then Jacob interrupts himself with the most personal and unexpected statement in this entire blessing chapter. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Right in the middle of Dan's blessing, Jacob cries out for divine salvation. As if looking at Dan's future, the serpent, the viper, the hidden ambush that produced in Jacob a despair that only God can address. And he's not wrong to despair. See, Dan's story in the Old Testament is the most cautionary of all tribes. The tribes settled in the far north, as far from Jerusalem as you could get while still being in the promised land. And the distance became spiritual as well as geographical. In Judges 18, the tribe of Dan sets up an idol, a carved image, at the city that they conquered and calls it their own sanctuary. The judge tribe became the idolatry tribe. The light of the candelabrum went out and they lit something else in its place. And by the time we reach Revelation chapter 7, the list of the sealed from every tribe of Israel, Dan's not there. 12 tribes, 12 seals, and Dan is absent. What we miss is the weight of this absence. A tribe whose windows Chagall painted with a candelabrum, an instrument of light, a tree of justice, the symbol of vocation that they were given, is the tribe that is not on the list of the redeemed in Revelation. The light went out. The candelabrum that they should have burned in the darkness of Israel's history was extinguished by the idolatry the tribe chose. The dark blue of the window is not just atmospheric, it's prophetic. The darkness that surrounds the candelabrum in Chagall's windows is the darkness that eventually consumed the tribe that was supposed to push back. And this is the most uncomfortable thing that I will say in this series. The calling does not guarantee the faithfulness. The vocation does not ensure the completion. Dan was called to judge. Dan was given the candelabrum. Dan had the light. And Dan put it down. The candelabrum sits in the dark blue of the window. It's still there. It's still painted. The potential is still available and visible. And the calling was real. But the tribe that received it chose something else. It chose the serpent's path over the judge's seat. It chose the idol over the candelabrum. It chose the darkness over light. That light that they were given to carry. And Jacob, who saw it coming, cried out in the middle of Dan's blessing, "I wait for your salvation, O Lord." Because sometimes the most painful response to what you see coming is not a strategy, it's a prayer. And in the middle we have Gad, the warrior on the frontier. And the shift from Dan to Gad is immediate and visceral. Where Dan's window is dark and centered on a candelabrum, the instrument of light and stillness, Gad's window is full of movement. Weapons, spears, shields, the imagery of battle on every side. And Chagall painted Gad's window as a warrior's window. The tribe whose entire existence was defined by the fight. Jacob's blessing over Gad is the shortest and the most punchy in the chapter of Genesis 49. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid their hills. That's it. That's the whole blessing. 11 words in English. Raiders shall raid him, and he shall raid at their hills. Attack and counterattack. Pressure from every side and pressure returned. The warrior who is never not in a fight. And Moses expands on this in Deuteronomy 33. Blessed is he who enlarges Gad. Gad crouches like a lion. He tears off arm and scalp. He chose the best of the land for himself, for there a commander's portion was reserved. And he came with the heads of the people. With Israel he executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments for Israel. Crouches like a lion. Tears off arm and scalp. This is violent imagery of a tribe that survived by being more fierce than what came against it. Gad's territory tells the story. The tribe chose to settle on the east side of Jordan, outside the traditional boundaries of the Promised Land, in the territory of Gilead, and on the frontier between Israel and the surrounding nations. It was rich land. It was good for cattle, and it was exposed land. No natural buffer. No protected center. The frontier where the enemies came first, and Gad chose it. The tribe did not end up on the frontier by accident or by assignment. Again, they chose it. When Moses was distributing the land, Gad and Reuben came to him and said, this is land that's good for cattle, and we have cattle, so let us have it. And Moses agreed, with the condition that they would cross the Jordan with the brothers and fight for the land on the other side before returning to settle on the east. And they agreed, and they kept their word. In Joshua chapter 1, when the people are about to cross the Jordan and begin the conquest, Joshua reminds the Gadites of their commitment. And they respond, all that you have commanded us, we will do. The fighting tribe chose the exposed place and then honored the commitment to fight for their brothers, even when it meant leaving their own families behind. This is the theology of Gad's window. You see, the weapons are not the problem. The fighting is not the failure. The tribe that chose the frontier and honored its commitment to fight for others, even at the cost of itself, is a picture of something the New Testament will articulate explicitly. Paul in Ephesians 6 describes the Christian life in the language of Gad's window. Put on the full armor of God. Take up the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, the breastplate of righteousness, and stand. Having done all, stand. The frontier is not a mistake. The exposed place is sometimes the calling. And the tribe that is pressed on every side but presses back. The warrior who raids at the hills, the lion that crouches and then moves. The people who chose the hard territory and kept their word to fight for their brothers before settling in what they had claimed. Gad's weapons and Chagall's windows are not a warning. They're actually an invitation. You see, not every believer is called to the center. Some are called to the frontier. Some are called and placed in the exposed territory. The hard marriage, the difficult workplace, the neighborhood nobody else wants, the community the rest of the church has written off. And the calling of the frontier is not to lament the exposure, but to fight faithfully in the place that you chose or replace. Raiders shall raid Gad, but Gad shall raid at their hills. The fight is real. The pressure is real. The exposure is real, but the warrior crouches like a lion. And when the moment comes, moves. Moses blesses the Gadites with a remarkable word. He executed the justice of the Lord. The justice that Dan was supposed to deliver from the seat of the judge, Dan brought forth from the serpent's ambush. The justice that failed in Dan found its expression in Gad. The tribe that chose the frontier and fought faithfully executed the justice of the Lord in the wilderness where justice was most needed. The candelabrum of Dan went dark, but the weapons of Gad kept shining in the frontier. And then we move on to Asher and the oil that never runs out. And then the west wall gives us something entirely unexpected after the dark blue of Dan and the weapons of Gad. We have Asher's peaceful window. Chagall painted it in dark gray-green, my wife's favorite color probably. Close to it, right? I don't know. The color of the olive tree. Not the battle-worn colors of Gad, not the threatening darkness of Dan, the deep, quiet green of the olive grove. The color of something that has been growing for a very long time and is still producing. Jacob's blessing over Asher is one of the most abundant in the entire chapter, in chapter 49. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall yield royal delicacies. Rich food, royal delicacies, a tribe whose bread is fat, a tribe that produces what kings eat. And then Moses goes on and amplifies this in Deuteronomy chapter 33. Most blessed are of sons be Asher. Let him be the favorite of his brothers, and let him dip his foot in oil. Your bars shall be iron and bronze, and your days so shall your strength be. Dip his foot in oil. And your days so shall your strength be. Asher's territory in the Promised Land ran along the northern coast. The most fertile strip of land in all of Canaan, the olive groves of Asher, were legendary. The oil produced in Asher's territory was the oil that supplied the tabernacle's menorah. The light of the sacred space fed by Asher's abundance. The tribe that produced the olive oil that kept the candelabrum of the sanctuary burning, which means the candelabrum of Dan and the oil of Asher belong together in a way that Chagall may not have fully intended when he placed them on the same wall. You see, Dan was given the candelabrum and Asher produced the oil, the light and the fuel, the instrument and the resource, the tribe of judgment and the tribe of abundance placed together on the west wall. The candelabrum that went dark because it ran out of the oil that it should have received from its neighbor. This is not accidental. This is the narrator's quiet theology of community. That the tribes need each other. The judge needs the oil. The candelabrum needs the abundance. Dan's light going out was not only Dan's failure, but it was also the failure of the community to be what Asher's oil was designed to enable. We fail to catch what Moses says, as your days, so shall your strength be. This is one of the most quietly extraordinary promises in the entire Old Testament. Not that the strength will be great. Not that the abundance will be overwhelming, but that it will be proportional. As your days. However long the days are, however hard the days become, so shall your strength be. The provision matches the need here. The oil is always enough for the lamp. The bread is always royal for the one who receives it. The strength is always sufficient for the day that requires it. This is the theology behind manna. The provision that arrives daily, not stored up, not accumulated, given for the day in the measure of the day that it requires. Asher's oil is the daily sufficiency of a God who gives exactly what the moment needs. Not less, not dramatically more, but enough. Always enough. And as your days, so shall your strength be. Asher's territory also produced something the New Testament will connect to the most significant anointing in history. Luke 2, when Jesus is brought to the temple as an infant, the prophetess Anna appears. And she's from the tribe of Asher. The woman who first publicly proclaims that the infant Jesus as the one who will bring redemption to Jerusalem is a daughter of Asher. The tribe of oil and abundance and royal delicacies produces the prophetess who anoints the moment of the Messiah's presentation with her proclamation. The gray green of Asher's olive tree reaches all the way to the temple in Jerusalem, where an old woman sees the child and begins to speak of him to all who are waiting for the redemption of Jerusalem. The oil of Asher finally reached the lamp. What the west wall is saying. Again, we have 3 windows. We have 3 stories. But we have 3 different postures in wilderness. Dan the judge, given the candelabrum, called to light the darkness, who chose the serpent's path and watched the light go out, the cautionary window. The dark blue that asks every believer, what have you done with the light that you've been given? Gad the warrior, pressing back against every raid, a crouching lion, faithfully fighting on the frontier that he chose, executing the justice of the Lord in exposed territory. The warrior window. The weapons that invite every believer into the fight that they are called to rather than the safety that they prefer. Asher the abundant. Dipping his foot in oil, yielding royal delicacies, producing the fuel that kept the sacred light burning, receiving the promise that as the days are, so shall the strength be. The window of provision. The gray-green of the olive tree that asks every believer, are you receiving the daily sufficiency of the God who gives exactly what the day requires? The west wall is the wall of wilderness. It's the wall of afternoon light. The wall of the tribes who lived on the edges and fought in the exposed places and produced the abundance that the sinner needed to keep burning. And it faces the direction of the light that is moving. Not towards the sunrise, towards the settled place the sun is heading as the day progresses. The west wall is the wall of faithfulness through the middle of the day. Through the long hours when the morning excitement is past and the evening resolution has not yet arrived. And the question is simply, will you keep burning through the afternoon? Dan's candelabrum went dark in the afternoon. Gad's weapons kept swinging. Asher's oil kept flowing. And then we get to the Christ who fulfills the west wall. Jesus stood in the temple, in the treasury, near the menorah and said, I am the light of the world. And whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. John 8:12. The setting matters here. He set it near the great menorahs of the temple, the instruments of light that Asher's olive oil kept burning. He positioned himself as the fulfillment of everything the candelabrum pointed towards. Not the instrument of light, but light itself. Not the lamp that needed oil, the source from which all oil ultimately comes. Dan was given the candelabrum and put it down. Christ picked it up. The judge that Dan was called to be, discerning, just, seeing clearly, Christ is. Not the serpent that bites from ambush, the judge who judges with perfect righteousness and whose judgments are always and only true. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Remember Jacob cried that in the middle of Dan's blessing? The salvation that Dan's tribe could not produce with its candelabrum or its serpent's cunning arrived in the one that Dan's tribe was supposed to point toward. The light that Dan extinguished, Christ rekindled. And he promised that this light would not go out, and darkness cannot overcome it. Paul's description of the armor of God in Ephesians 6 is Gad's window applied to every believer. The full armor, the shield, the sword, the breastplate, and stand. Having done all, stand. the warrior spirituality of Gad. The tribe that chose the frontier and fought faithfully for its brothers is the posture that Christ calls his people to in a territory the powers think that they still control. You see, we're not called to safety. We're called to be on the frontier. We're called to the exposed territory, to the place where raiders raid. And the calling is to raid at their heels. Sorry. Christ the warrior, not with the weapons of the world, but with the weapons of righteousness on the right hand and on the left. He fulfills Gad's window and what Gad's window was pointing toward. The one who crouches like a lion rises like a lion. The Lion of Judah, who is also the Lamb. The ultimate warrior who fights not with spear and shield, but with truth and love, and a word that does not return empty. And then we get to Asher's oil, the daily sufficiency. And as your days, so your strength finds its fulfillment in the one who said that I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. John 6:35. These aren't royal delicacies from a fertile territory in the northern coast of Canaan. The bread of life, the living water, the provision that does not need to be stored up or anxiously accumulated because it arrives fresh for the day and what the day requires. As your days, so your strength. That's the manna principle. That's the Asher principle. And the daily bread that Jesus taught his disciples to pray for, give us this day our daily bread, is the oil of Asher flowing from the source who is the bread of life. The prophetess Anna from the tribe of Asher recognized a child in the temple and proclaimed his redemption to everyone waiting. The tribe whose oil kept the temple menorah burning produced the woman who first anointed the Messiah's public presence with her proclamation. The oil of Asher reached the Messiah's presentation just as the oil of Asher reached the lamp of the sanctuary. The oil always reaches the lamp when the lamp belongs to the one who is the light. 3 windows, 1 light. Dan's candelabrum finds its fulfillment in the one who is the light of the world that darkness cannot overcome. Gad's weapons find their fulfillment in the one who arms his people for the frontier fight with the full armor of God, full of grace and truth and love and mercy. Asher's oil finds its fulfillment in the one who is the bread of life, the daily sufficiency whose strength matches every day that requires it. So which window are you? Chagall placed these 3 windows on the west wall deliberately. The afternoon light that comes through the west wall, the long middle of the day, the hours between the morning's fresh start and the evening's resolution, the hours when the excitement of the beginning is worn off and the fatigue of the long fight is set in, and the question is simply whether you will keep burning. Dan's question is the question of the afternoon. Will you keep the light? Will you tend the candelabrum? Will you resist the serpent's path that offers the appearance of justice without the cost of faithfulness? Or will you put the light down and light something else? Something easier, something cheaper, something that looks like light but does not require the oil of daily connection to the source. Gad's question is the question of the frontier. Have you chosen the exposed territory, the hard assignment, the place nobody else wanted that you felt called to? And having chosen it, are you honoring that commitment? Are you fighting for your brothers and your sisters even when the fight costs you something? Are you raiding at the heels of what raids you? Pressing back against what presses you? Crouching like a lion, moving when the moment comes? Asher's question is the question of provision. Are you receiving the daily sufficiency? Are you trusting the as your day so your strength promise? Or are you anxiously accumulating and storing and calculating whether the oil will last, when the one who sends the oil has promised that the oil matches the day? 3 questions, 3 windows, 3 postures in the wilderness of the long afternoon. But the light of the world is still shining. The armor of God is still available. And the bread of life is still sufficient for every day. The west wall faces the direction the light is moving. And the thing that Chagall asked, I think, and the thing that I'm going to ask you is to just keep burning.